Hey guys, Will here. So today we're going to be taking a look at the Heusinkveld MagShift sequential shifter. Now you can see we've also got the V2 handbrake from Heusinkveld on the table here too. We're going to be having a look at that in detail in the next video. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on that one. But you might be thinking a shifter's a shifter. They all pretty much do exactly the same thing. This shifter has some pretty unique features both on the hardware and the software side of things. So we're going to be unpacking everything in as much detail as we can today to give you everything you need to know to decide whether this might be the sequential shifter for your sim rig. So let's dive in. Okay, so first things first today, big thank you to Heusinkveld for sending across their shifter and handbrake for us to check out. Now, as we get on through today's video, we may be comparing against some other competitive products. So it's important that you guys are aware that everything that we talk about in today's video was all sent to us under the exact same conditions. Now, we don't have a direct affiliate relationship with Heusinkveld, but we do have a couple of affiliate partners which are resellers for the Heusinkveld brand. So just make sure you're doing your own research, make sure you're getting the best possible deal for where you are in the world. Make sure you check the links down in the description below for any relevant discount codes. Whether you're looking at picking up these products or any other sim racing products, chances are you'll be able to pick yourself up a pretty decent deal and help us out in the process as well at no additional cost. So we really appreciate your support there. But as is always the case here at Boosted Media, no third party has any kind of input into anything we're saying today. Everything I'll be sharing is just my own observations and my own opinions of the products that we're testing out. And that brings us conveniently to talking about pricing. So I'm not going to get bogged down in competitive pricing here, but just to let you guys know, the Heusinkveld MagShift does come in at €371.07. So it is relatively expensive. You are getting a very high quality product for that price though. And of course, do just make sure that you do factor in any potential local taxes or import duties and so forth into that price as well, depending on where you are in the world. So what exactly are you getting for your money here? Now, just like with the Heusinkveld pedals that we've taken a look at previously here on the channel, we've got a stainless steel construction with this beautiful bead blasted finish. So it does give it that nice high quality sort of industrial look. The black grip material around the top here is plastic. We'll talk about that later on. And you'll also notice three little plastic buttons on the front here too, which give us quite a bit of additional functionality. Some pretty unique things that you can do in the software that we'll take a look at later on as well. Now, mechanically, there are quite a few unique things about this as well. So this is a magnetic shifter. So it's using a magnet internally as well as the spring that you can see here to provide the force. And that means that as you pull the shifter, you actually have to overcome that magnetic force. And that gives you a nice sort of snap feeling, which simulates the sensation of a gear actually clicking into place inside a transmission in a real car. Now, it doesn't feel exactly the same as a real mechanical gearbox. There are a couple of other shifters that we have tried over the years. In fairness, a lot more expensive than what you're paying for this, even though this is quite expensive. And some of those do actually give the genuine sensation of a gear physically clunking into place, but this does provide quite an authentic sensation. Now, the thing that I think is really cool about this design is you can actually independently adjust the resistance in both the upshift and downshift, as well as adjusting the overall resistance. So you've got an adjustment range of from 4.5 kilograms of force all the way up to 11 kilograms of force. So it can actually be quite stiff if you want it to be. It does become quite loud if you do that, but we'll talk about that later on as well. But yeah, I actually preferred to soften off or back off the resistance on my downshift a little bit. So when I'm pushing it away from me, as I'm maybe turning into a corner, sort of trying to, feather the car through a bend and just kind of wanting to shift down a couple of times, you don't necessarily want a whole lot of resistance there, but then I like to have a nice solid mechanical shift when I'm shifting up gears because it gives you just a more, I guess, immersive experience overall. You don't necessarily need to do that, and it doesn't necessarily feel more realistic, but it is very, very immersive when you're having to really sort of go, pull the gears in every single time. So I really actually enjoyed that experience. So having that independent adjustment does mean that you can really dial this thing in to feel pretty much however you want it to feel. And I'm very confident that with an adjustment range between 4.5 and 11 kilograms, there isn't going to be anybody that isn't going to find a setting that suits them. So yeah, they've definitely done a good job there trying to cater to as many people as possible in the design. Another thing that I really like about this mechanical design before we move on into some of the adjustments and things is that its physical footprint is very small as well. You'll see some other shifters that give a more genuine kind of mechanical feel like this one does tend to be quite a bit bigger than this. The footprint of this guy is 107 millimeters long by 50 millimeters wide. And then the height of the shifter as it sits now is 553 millimeters. You also have this mounting bracket, which does raise it up by about another centimeter or 10 millimeters in the lowest position. And then you can raise or lower by a further 15 millimeters inside this bracket as well. So the shifter sits inside the bracket like this. All the mounting hardware is included, of course. So at the lowest setting, it's going to sit about there. You can then go up and up again up to about 15 millimeters higher than what you had initially. So that's going to take the overall height of the shifter off whatever you got it mounted to about 370 millimeters, give or take a couple of millimeters by my measurement. Now you guys have probably already figured this out, but because we've got 3 holes front and back, that means we can also adjust the angle of the shifter on our rig as well if we wish to do so. Now you'll also notice a couple of slots cut out on the bottom of the stainless steel mounting bracket as well. So if you grab a piece of profile quickly just to simulate what you would have on your rig at home to mount this on, you can mount it on any surface you want, of course, but I would imagine most people are probably going to be mounting this on profile. So we've got a couple of M6 T-nuts sitting in there, and those are of course included. So if we drop a couple of bolts in, just to give you an idea here, so you can see now that gives us the ability to slide both forward and backwards like this. I'll hold it up like this so you guys can see a little bit. So we can slide from side to side to get it in the exact position that we want on the profile, but we can also twist from side to side as well. Now, most of us, including myself, like to have the shifter and the handbrake angled slightly towards us, maybe like 10 degrees or so, just so it's a little bit more natural. So you're not kind of going elbow out to shift like that. It's a little bit more natural to have it on a bit of an angle. So that will absolutely have you covered. Very clever design there. In case you were wondering, as far as the stainless steel goes here, the mounting bracket is 3 millimeters thick, and the stainless steel that we have on the housing of the shifter itself is 2 millimeters thick. Absolutely no issues with flex whatsoever on any of the hardware provided by Heusinkveld. Now, hopefully it's obvious that the amount of flex that you're going to have overall will, of course, depend on the rig that you're mounting it to. 4.5 kilograms isn't a whole lot of activation force, but if you're going to be pushing this up to 11 kilograms, then you are going to want to have quite a solid mount to mount it on. So with all that out of the way, let's have a little look internally, see exactly how the mechanism works. Then we'll talk a little bit more about adjustments. Then we'll get into the software, show you what these buttons do and some of the additional functionality, and then we'll get into the driving experience. So I'm taking the covers off here now so we can have a closer look at exactly what's going on inside. Now, one unique feature, which I haven't mentioned until now because I wanted to actually show you, is that this is actually using an optical sensor to sense when the shifter is activated in either direction. So that means that there's no mechanical moving parts that can wear and tear or change their calibration over time. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be more reliable than something that's using, proper automotive grade mechanical switches that are sealed and don't allow dirt and debris inside, or something like a Hall effect sensor, for example, that uses the position of a magnet to influence the flow of electrons across a metal plate and sense the input that way. But of course, with an optical sensor, there is always the possibility that some dirt and debris may fall inside and actually block that optical sensor. We saw a couple of issues with the Logitech G27 and G25 back in the day. Those used an optical sensor similar to this to detect the center position, and a few people had issues with that over time. Now, obviously, we're not judging this product. We're not saying that that's going to happen with this because it happened on a completely different brand's, a completely different product, but just to give you an idea of some of the ways we've seen this kind of a design used previously. So what exactly is going on here? We've got a metal frame here. You can see the 3 adjustment points here. We haven't really talked about that in a lot of detail yet, but you can see these 3 hex screws here. There are 3 exactly the same on the opposing side as well, and they of course sit behind the metal plate in these 3 slots when this cover is installed. And inside the kit, you get included a couple of little Torx keys, and all you need to do is just put the key in either side, loosen these off. This one here is the adjustment for our downshift, this one is the upshift, and this one is the overall adjustment, which influences both of those ones. So very simple to adjust, not something that you can just do on the fly without tools, but they do include the tools that you need. And look, I can't see that this is going to be something that people are going to be adjusting regularly anyway. It's most likely just going to be a set and forget thing once you've got it dialed into your personal preference. So I have no issues with that at all. Now it looks like these black areas here are actually a Delrin plastic material. So that is, in my experience, nice and solid, shouldn't ever cause any problems. Relatively lightweight as well. That's a material that we see quite frequently used in high-end sim racing products. And then you can see down the bottom here, this magnet. So this is the magnet that releases when you pull the shifter. Now I'm going to try and do this on the table. Obviously it's not really designed to be done this way, but when we pull on the shifter, we should see, I'll try not to pinch my fingers, there we go. I might spin it around this way so you guys can see a little bit better. So we pull on the shifter, and you can see that magnet lifts up, and that's what provides that initial resistance that you have to overcome when you activate the shift. And there's a little arm here as well. I'm going to be very careful not to knock this out of alignment, but that little arm there passes past the little optical sensor, which sits between these 2 little blades here. And there's another one on the other side as well. And if you carefully look in there as I activate the shifter again, you should be able to see that little piece move past the sensor And that is how our upshift and downshift is detected. So very simple. You can see the PCB here as well for the 3 switches on the front, which we'll discuss in just a moment. And everything basically just locks into place. Just like with their pedals, you've got these little tabs on all of the pressed steel, and those all kind of just slot into their respective parts. When it's all bolted together, there's no rattling or anything like that. But this was all sealed up with Loctite as well. You can actually see a little bit of the Loctite left over on the bolts that I pulled out. And unfortunately, some of the particles of the Loctite, when I took it apart, did actually fall inside. And I'm a little bit worried about them falling onto the optical sensor. So I'll give this all a really good clean out before we put it all back together. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in here. Obviously, they've put a lot of thought into trying to keep the design as compact as possible. So that is a quick look at the internals for you. I'm going to get this cleaned up, put back together, and then we can dive in, take a look at the software and some of the cool things that we can do with the 3 buttons on the front here, and then we'll get into the overall driving experience. So let's take a quick look at the Heusinkveld Smart Control software now. So like a lot of other sim racing brands these days, any Heusinkveld device that you purchase will operate through this same software. You'll see along the top here, we've got a tab for MagShift. Any other device would show up as its own tab with its own settings that pertain to just it. So it keeps everything nice and integrated into the one piece of software, so you're not having to have multiple pieces of software for multiple devices. So just so you're aware of that. Now, obviously, they don't have the ecosystem that a lot of other brands do, so they don't have their own wheelbases, motion systems, and whatnot. But you know, over time, we might see more stuff. So it's great that they've got a single piece of software that integrates everything in. But anyway, let's go through this. So we've got an about page, just some basic information there. We've got profile management, so you can save and load profiles for each of your individual devices there, share them with your mates, your community, and so forth. And then the important stuff for the MagShift is all contained within the MagShift tab here. So we've got default settings. This preset makes your MagShift function like a regular shifter with 5 normal button outputs. So obviously upshift, downshift, and then 1, 2, 3 buttons along the bottom. Doubling your outputs. This preset configures your MagShift to have multiple outputs on each physical button. This means you can control an additional 5 buttons by holding the lever or buttons for a configurable amount of time. We've added buttons 6 through 10 for you, but feel free to play around. And then presets changes the following settings. So lever push, lever pull, and then middle, left, and right buttons. Then we've got back on track. We've all been there. You run off the track and come to a stop with the car still in high gear. Shifting back all the way to first neutral or reverse gear takes some time when using a sequential shifter. This MagShift preset alters the behavior of the MagShift when you pull or push the lever. Pulling the lever pulses button 1, so you can shift up without any delays. Change this behavior to hold if you want to. Holding the lever back for 650 milliseconds, though, triggers a second output. Button 6, hold, which you could map to the reverse gear. So you get the idea here. You can set up basically different functions based on, you know, push, pull, release, hold, or the amount of time that you're holding. And then the rest of the presets that they've put in here are basically just memes. So you've got a typing trainer that allows you to actually type keys with the outputs of this. You've got DJ MagShift. There's never been a more aggressive way of controlling your media player. Office attender. You can't keep on racing forever. Fear not, there's no reason not to. With your MagShift, we've added this preset to give you an excuse to use your MagShift whenever performing office tasks like editing documents. These are all just silly things, but it's basically just a showcase of some of the stuff you can do. You can even control some of the Windows functions through here as well. So we're going to go back to default now, and I'll just run you through exactly how the logic works in the background. So you'll notice a disable all primary and disable all secondary outputs. I'll explain what those do in just a moment, because those are important, and I'm very glad that they put them in there. So lever pull, let's use that as an example first. You've got your primary output, which is just the normal output of the lever. So when released or when pulled, we want to go with when pulled. The function is then pulsed. You can have it hold or pulse, and then the button that you want it to operate. So you can see if you scroll down, you've got your standard buttons 1 through 128, and then you've got all your keys as well for your keyboard, as well as number pad, F keys, return, spacebar, basically all the functions of the keyboard. And then you've got the Windows functions like next track, previous track, stop, play, pause. And that's how all those presets that we were looking at before actually operate behind the scenes. So you can set up whatever function you want, but we're just gonna stay with button 1 for now. So under this scenario, when we pull the lever, it's going to pulse button 1 for 100 milliseconds. So what that means is that regardless of how long you hold that lever down, it's only gonna actually send that signal for 100 milliseconds. So we could change that to hold. You can see the milliseconds selection then disappears, and basically that's just gonna stay active for as long as we're holding. I'll show you down on, I'm not gonna try and pull the lever on the table now, but if we push button 3 here, you'll notice at the moment, as long as I hold that button down, you'll see the little icon there to show that it's active, is staying active as long as I'm holding that button. If I change that to pulse, now when I press it, you'll see it'll only flash for 100 milliseconds. There you go. So it's only sending a pulse. So that is exactly what that does. So different sim racing titles, you might find that if you're holding the shifter a little bit longer than intended, it might just keep changing gear and so forth. So this is a way that you can really fine tune things in to do exactly what you want. And then underneath that, you've got a secondary output as well. And this is where we get into some of those more crazy things. So this is basically like a logic gate. So you've got no secondary function, you've got an AND function and an OR function. So AND is going to allow a second function that operates as well. So when we pull the lever, it's going to send the primary output as stipulated here, and after 100 milliseconds or whatever time frame you choose to select here, if still pulled or when released, hold or pulse button, whatever you want. So you can set up a second function to basically operate under these conditions. So let me know in the comments down below some of the ways that you can think of that this might be useful. We've also got an OR function as well here. So primary output is when released, pulse button 1 for 100 milliseconds, or after 1000 milliseconds, if still pulled, hold or pulse whatever button you want. So what that would do is when you pull the shifter towards you, it's not going to do anything. When you release it again, it will change the gear. Or if you still keep it held for more than a second or 1000 milliseconds, it's going to do whatever the secondary function is there. So look, to be honest with you guys, I couldn't think of, at least for the cars that I drive regularly, many useful things that I could do with this other than just quickly shifting into reverse like that preset that we saw. But yeah, let me know in the comments below what you think you might be able to use this for that might be useful for you. And then we can do exactly the same thing for lever push or the left button, middle button, or right button as well. So I think with the buttons, this is probably where this sort of stuff is maybe a little bit more useful day to day. One of the things that I found quite useful was for doing things like cycling headlight modes and so forth. So a long press would activate the headlights and then a momentary press would switch between headlight modes. Interior cabin light as well, even windscreen wipers. You could switch on and off the windscreen wipers with a long press and then cycle between the different speeds with a short press. So that was just some of the usage cases I could think of for the 3 buttons along the bottom. So you remember I mentioned earlier these 2 buttons here and why I was really glad that they exist and why they're so important. Hopefully now this is going to make sense. So top one, disable all primary outputs, does exactly that. So if you're trying to map your secondary inputs, you can imagine you might always end up mapping the primary input when you're trying to map the secondary, and vice versa as well. So we've got also a disable all secondary outputs here to make sure that when we try to map our primary, we're able to do so. So you can click on those just while you're mapping your controls and then uncheck them again once you're done to make sure that everything is functioning. And that's what those 2 functions are for. And that is a quick tour of the smart control software as it pertains to the MagShift specifically. Again, you can save profiles here, share them with your mates and so forth. Or if you really mess something up and you've got no idea what you did wrong, you can reset back to default as well. So yeah, let's move on now into the driving experience and wrap things up. Okay, so driving experience with the MagShift. So we had this on multiple different rigs. We've been running with it on and off and switching it out with various different shifters for a good number of months now. And yeah, I've got a few thoughts. Firstly, it is very loud. Even in the softer setting, it is still quite loud. You know, the higher you crank it up, the louder it does become. The kind of resistance level I like to run it at, which is about halfway, so maybe like 8 kilograms, it was definitely loud enough to hear over the top of my headphones and loud enough to be a deal breaker if you're trying to run it in an area that is, you know, around other people that are trying to study or sleep or anything like that. So definitely, you know, if that's an important consideration for you, then I would probably give this one a miss. Look, with any shifter, you know, the more authentic it feels, the louder it's going to be. That's just the way these things are by nature. So it's certainly not a complaint about this particular shifter specifically. It is just something that's important to consider with any shifter that you might be looking at running. Now, this is actually one of the reasons why I still to this day run the Analog shifter, the sequential shifter on my daily driver rig. Even though it's not the best feeling shifter out there by any means that we have access to, it just suits the need so well because it's relatively quiet, it's convenient, small footprint, and you can remove the knob as well. But we actually got their new H-pattern shifter, which we're looking at soon. So make sure you're subbed so you don't miss out on that. But anyway, I digress there. So look, otherwise it does have a relatively authentic feel for such a small form factor shifter. Their marketing says, feel the gears click into place. Look, I think that's probably a little bit of an embellishment. You do feel the sensation of that magnet releasing, of course, but it's not the same as feeling something actually mechanically kind of slide into place. So you get that initial release, but yeah, I wouldn't say that it feels like something mechanically moving inside a gearbox, but it definitely does give you that clunk. And look, a lot of these sequential shifters these days are electronic in real cars anyway. In fact, I know a few guys that actually run race cars that use sim racing shifters in their real life race cars. But yeah, I do feel like feeling the gears actually clicking into place is maybe a little bit of an embellishment there, but it is certainly right up there when it comes to the quality of the feel overall. Definitely one of my preferred shifters. You know, a lot of sequential shifters are a little bit sloppy in the initial pull, and then you don't really feel the click until the end. What I really like about this is that initial resistance is actually, you know, the initial part of the shift. So you have to overcome it to get it to start moving rather than having it being something that you're feeling towards the end of the movement. And some other shifters as well have like a spring-loaded ball bearing mechanism that you have to kind of go past on the way through. So I do prefer the design of this in terms of that initial feeling. I think that this just does a better job and is more immersive overall than most other sequential shifters that I've tried. The one thing that I don't like in terms of the feel of this is this plastic grip on the top here and just the shape of this area overall. It did strike both Tom and I as a little bit strange that the only physical touch points on the shifter are the only plastic things on the external, at least, of this shifter as well. So this part here is plastic. The buttons are plastic as well. Now the buttons actually do have a really nice clicky feel to them. They're some of the nicest buttons you'll ever feel, but yeah, they are plastic touch points, and I just thought that that was a little bit strange. The big complaint that I have with this shifter handle, and same deal with the handbrake as well, we'll get into that when we do our review of the handbrake. What I found is when I grip the shifter, and this is going to be different for everybody, but even with gloves on, I found that I'd grip it sort of here. So you imagine my hand grabbing it like this, and then as I pull it, it's actually pinching this area of skin on my hand like that. And I actually ended up with a big red mark there after only maybe like an hour or so of driving. Now you would build up a resistance to it over time and it probably wouldn't be an issue long term, but even with gloves on, I did just find it quite uncomfortable, and it almost got to the point where it started to blister. I had to stop driving, you know, wait for it to sort of recover, and then I was able to start again. Over the course of a couple of days, it came good. But yeah, look, with most things like this, you can kind of adjust your hand position and how you grab something to, you know, compensate for things like that. But when you're just quickly grabbing at a handbrake or quickly grabbing at a shifter, it can be a little bit awkward to sort of always try to grab it in the same way. Like ideally, I would probably want to try and grab it with the top of my hand like this. But when you're just quickly grabbing at something, you do tend to sort of claw at it a little bit. And yeah, I just found it to be a little bit uncomfortable to use for that reason. I'd be really interested to hear from you guys that own one of these. Has that been in your experience as well? Because obviously I'm only one person and that is a very subjective preference type thing. I do like the look of it. I think it looks really cool, but yeah, I just didn't find it to be the most comfortable thing in the world. Look, I do quite like the idea of having a hard material here rather than something soft and squishy that might wear down or break apart over time. Again, because you are just kind of ripping at it. I can imagine that if this was rubber or silicone or something like that, it probably would fail over time, whereas this is going to be absolutely bulletproof. It's never going to have an issue. It's never going to show signs of wear and tear or anything like that. It does have a very slight seam in there that you can see where the two halves of the injection molded plastic are kind of bolted together, but it's not something that I can feel really when I'm driving at all. It's only really if you kind of get in there and, you know, feel it like that, that you'll notice it at all. So that's certainly not a point of complaint, I don't think, but it is there for those of you who are sensitive to that kind of thing. But yeah, look, I mean, honestly, that's the only complaint with it, and that is probably just a me thing. Let us know in the comments down below if you've had that same problem with it at all. But yeah, look, really love the feeling of it overall. I love the adjustability. The fact that you can independently adjust the upshift and downshift is really cool. Those creative options that we have in the smart control software that we looked at earlier are quite cool as well. There's not a whole lot of functionality that you can build into a shifter, but I did think that those little things that they added there were quite cool. And particularly if you don't already have a button box on your sim, you don't have any wheels that have a whole lot of buttons on them, you might find that particularly useful. For me, you know, I've got an abundance of buttons all over my rig, so I don't really use them all that much, but I did find them useful, as I was saying before, for cycling through light modes, interior lights, windscreen wipers and things like that, because of the functionality that we have with different modes depending on how you push buttons when they're released, timing and so forth. So yeah, look, overall I have no issues recommending it at all. I think they've done a really good job here. Just like with their pedals, it's very clear that they spent a lot of time refining the product, and you know, they really have a very good understanding what it is that sim racers want, and that's because the guys at Heusinkveld are sim racers themselves, and that really shows through in all of the products that we've looked at over the years. And yeah, this is absolutely no exception. So yeah, no problem recommending it. Just be aware of the small little issue I had with the grip being a little bit awkward on my hand. Chances are that won't be a problem for you, but again, let me know in the comments below if it has been. And yeah, just be aware that it is quite loud. If you're in an environment where that's going to be a problem for you, you might want to look elsewhere. That will come with the compromise of something that probably won't feel quite as authentic, realistic, and immersive, but that is just the trade-off when it comes to any shifter. But yeah, otherwise, very, very solid product. Absolutely no issue recommending it. And that is my review of the Heusinkveld MagShift. So hopefully it's been helpful for you. If it has, please do leave a thumbs up. Make sure you're subbed as well so you don't miss out on future reviews. We'll be taking a look at their new handbrake V2 up next. We've got a whole bunch of really cool stuff that we're going to be looking at over the coming months right here at Boosted Media. So stay tuned for that. If you do want to pick up any sim racing gear, check those links down in the description below as well. That's an awesome way of saving yourselves a little bit of cash and helping us out in the process as well. And yeah, I think that is it for today's video. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you again very soon. Bye.